Shin Megami Tensei V is just over 2 weeks from releasing, and I can't wait for you guys to get your hands on it. But in the meantime, we had you guys ask questions in the comments of our last Shin Megami Tensei V preview video, as well as Twitter, and you guys had a lot to say, so we're going to talk about that. Of course, I can't answer every single question because a lot of the questions you guys asked were in the realm of spoiler territory as well as kind of past the embargo, so we can't really talk about that at the moment, but I'll be answering your questions to the best of my ability. And just like the last video, I'm only allowed to show trailer footage that has already been released by Atlas, so that'll be on screen as I answer you guys' questions. And also, I'm pulling questions from both the YouTube comments of our last Shin Megami Tensei video as well as Twitter. So the first question I want to answer, and this is something that I didn't see specifically in our last Shin Megami Tensei video, but I see this question asked all the time through Twitter, YouTube comments of people who just played Persona or people who are just trying to get into Shin Megami Tensei for the first time. And that question is, can you start with this game? And the answer is yes, you can start with Shin Megami Tensei V. You don't have to play any of the previous games in order to enjoy the story. It's just like the Persona games, Final Fantasy. Each game in the Shin Megami Tensei series, for the most part, has their own contained story. So yes, you can jump directly into this game and you're going to be able to fully enjoy the experience. The second question I have, and this is from YouTube, from the user Gotta Love Depeche Mode. He says, hey GameXplain, I have a few questions. His first question is, how is the frame rate in this game? Locked 30 FPS perhaps? Any stutters? And from what I've played, the game seems to have a 30 FPS, or at least a target of 30 FPS. I can't tell if it goes higher, but I can definitely tell you that it does go a little bit lower at some points, especially when you're exploring these really dense environments. Usually I see it the most when you start sprinting in an environment, things like that. It's not like really bad. The performance is still like, for the most part, okay. But yeah, if you are extremely sensitive to frame rate drops and stuff like that, you're definitely gonna notice it. It's not as bad as Nocturne though, that's the good part. The Switch version of Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne is not really that good in terms of performance. Any visual effect in battle will cause that game to lag. When the fiends pop up, it's a really ridiculously laggy experience, and it's not really fun to look at. It's fun to play, but to look at is a bit of an eyesore. Luckily though, in Shin Megami Tensei V, a lot of the visual effects in battle don't seem to tank the frame rate that badly, and if at all really. Battles seem pretty much stable for the most part. It's just the exploration, that's where I noticed, oh, there is a bit of a stutter. So. And his next question, this is public knowledge now, it's been already said by Atlas, but he asks, can we turn off or speed up battle animations? And the answer is yes, you can turn off the battle animations. You can have it where you can press A to skip it, that's what I have it set to, or you can have the option to just turn off the battle animations altogether, so no matter what, it'll just skip past that. So that's pretty cool. I don't think you can speed it up. As far as I know, you can't speed it up, but you can turn it off with A, or you can just have it off automatically. So that's good. I've seen a lot of people worried about that because there are some, as good as the animations are in this game, the battle animations, they are pretty long, and especially like if you have to spam the same move over and over, to maximize damage, it would be kind of annoying to have to watch that entire animation play off over and over. So his third question is there an option to save any time, or did save points return? So this is something that I can answer because it's something that's revealed extremely early in the game. You have these terminals which are called leyline founts, and this is basically the center where you would be entering your item shop and all that stuff, World of Shadows. You have the option to save the game there. So unlike Shin Megami Tensei IV, you can't save everywhere, you can't access the World of Shadows everywhere. You have to go to these leyline founts in order to access those functions. So yeah, it's more like Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne in the fact that you have to go to an area just to save the game. So it's not like Shin Megami Tensei IV, even though I really enjoyed the convenience of being able to save everywhere, especially after a really hard boss fight, but that's fine. And his last question is buffing really only locked to single targets? So yes, by default, buffs like Rakukaja for defense, Tsukukaja for accuracy, and Tarukaja for offensive abilities, by default only target one party member. So you'll have to find the group version of that skill, something like Matarukaja, Masukukaja, Marakukaja, in order to buff the entire party. We'll talk more about buffs in a future video, but as of now, yes, they are default to target just one person. Okay, so the Anonymous Who Lurks More asks, what resolution does the game run at while docked and handheld? Alright, so I don't have the tools that I can actually pixel count, so I can't tell you what the actual resolution is, but on dock mode, for the most part, it looks pretty fine. I don't think it's 1080p, it looks a little lower than that, and in handheld mode, it definitely isn't 720p, because I can tell if it's 720p, because it'll be razor sharp. It's comparable to like Dragon Quest XI S, which makes sense because they're both Unreal Engine 4 titles on Switch and, big JRPGs. I'd say basically it looks very similar to Dragon Quest XI docked and handheld performance, but we'll have to wait for other channels to actually cover that. But as of now, I can't really tell, but it does still look good, even though on handheld mode it can be a little bit on the blurry side. It still looks really good. Zero Chill asks, how would you rate the music in the game? The soundtrack is amazing so far, man. Like, it's so good. And this is the same composer that composed for Shin Megami Tensei 4 and for Apocalypse. So you know this guy really snapped on this game. It's really good. Okay, so moving over to Twitter, Nomar asked, is there a jump button? It looked like it in the reveal, but I've been avoiding the trailers and gameplay because Atlas likes to spoil. Yes, there's a jump button, and it's freaking awesome. It seems like such a basic thing, but for Shin Megami Tensei and even games like Persona, I don't mean to mention it, but none of those games, for the most part, at least in mainline, you can't really jump. You can only run around, and so the fact that you can jump adds a lot more possibilities in the world and things that you can, get to, which is really awesome. And that's just one of the things where, like, when they revealed it earlier this year at E3, that was one of the high points for me. It's like, oh snap, you can jump. It seems like so lame, but it's like you can actually jump in the game, which enables a lot more possibilities in the overworld and stuff like that. So that's really cool. Basically, just anything that enhances your mobility and just lets you move around and get around quicker in this game is awesome to me. So I'm really glad to see that. Next question is from Chip Corley. Are there any random encounters? No, in this game they finally moved away. Well, I say finally. In SMT4 they moved away from random encounters. But the thing about it is that in this game you can see the demons on the overworld. You can see specific demons, whatever they are. If you see a pixie, a slime, they will actually be on the overworld, which is really cool, and I believe a first for the series in mainline. So yeah, there are no random encounters, thank you, because I don't really like random encounters in JRPGs. I prefer being able to choose my battles and just be ready for whatever monster is trying to hurl itself toward me, so I'm really happy with that change. Alright, so this next question, and this is a can of worms opening, it's from Ig Nilsson from Twitter. He says, explain the differences between Persona series and Shin Megami Tensei. Side note, I do know the differences, but it would be nice if the audience could listen for once. So, in my opinion, the differences between Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, and this is kind of like off topic, but the differences to me is that Persona is more of a character-focused series, while Shin Megami Tensei has a focus on like big dire choices and the world itself and atmosphere and just kind of the war between the whole law and chaos thing, whereas Persona will have its own sort of societal issues and things like that. And then there's obviously the high school setting, which most of the Persona games, or at least the ones that I've seen, take place at. And yeah, it's kind of like a split experience with Persona, where you get half of the social sim aspects of it and then you get half of the dungeon crawling, which is actually a really awesome formula. Shin Megami Tensei is more focused on the dungeon crawling aspect of it, so it's more of like a traditional JRPG, something like Dragon Quest or like old school Final Fantasy, things like that. And in terms of gameplay, that's where another difference is with the Persona games, you have the human characters summoning personas, but in Shin Megami Tensei, you are fighting alongside those personas. In that game, they're called demons. They're the same models, but they're called demons in Shin Megami Tensei, personas in Persona. So yeah, it's more of just a different style of game. It's in terms of atmosphere and like world building, it's on a completely different level. You can't really compare the two because one is trying to go for one thing and the other is trying to just go for this other thing. Usually dealing with an apocalypse with Shin Megami Tensei and dealing with like societal issues, like I said, with Persona. But they're both good in their own right and they both do their jobs perfectly. So in a nutshell, that's what I think the differences between Shin Megami Tensei and Persona is. Inaki-san asks, is there a difficulty setting at the beginning of the game, or do you have to wait until a bit later in the game to access the settings? From the very beginning, you can select your difficulty option. From the beginning, you can select casual, normal, or hard. So just pick the setting that matches your playstyle. Alright, so Joe Dillon asks, what is it? Well, Joe Dillon, Shin Megami Tensei V is the newest entry in the mainline Shin Megami Tensei series, which is a series that has been going on for a long time, started all the way back on the Super Nintendo, and has produced tons of different series such as Persona, Devil Summoner, Devil Survivor, Digital Devil Saga, and a ton more that are a bit more obscure, but yes, it is a really big series, and it's one of my favorite JRPG series of all time, so Shin Megami Tensei is really good. Kazan Rokuyari asks, is skill inheritance still in the game like in 4 Apocalypse? Yes, skill inheritance it's still in this game as a system, it's just done a little bit differently. It's called Essences. I'll expand upon that more in my review, but it is in this game, it's just done a little bit differently, and actually I like the way it's done more in this game. Plesio asks, does the game support the Switch's video capture? So the version I have does not seem to support video capture. I can take screenshots, but I can't take videos, but there is a day one patch planned for launch, so that could change. But at the moment, no, I can't seem to record videos. I had to do it directly from my capture card. Cody Pate asks, the major question, did you enjoy your 50 hours or did it feel forced? If it was natural progression and you eagerly awaited to play more, sign me up. Okay, so the game to me felt extremely fun. The story is like well paced. Not every game needs to be like over 100 hours for it to be good. This game lasted me around 60 hours total to finish, and I think it was absolutely worth it. It was a ton of fun. I always was like wanting to get to the next objective and beat the boss so I can continue with the story and see what was coming up next and see what other challenges I had. So yeah, it was really well paced, and I think that's a pretty good amount of content and time that you'll be spending in this game. Now, this is a question that I've seen asked around people who are trying to get into SMT, who have only played games like Persona 4, Persona 5, haven't gotten into mainline yet. And the question is, will you like SMT if you've only played Persona? In my opinion, yes. While the story structure is slightly different in SMT, it focuses more on philosophy, like I discussed earlier, as opposed to like the societal issues that Persona usually tackles. I think that the gameplay is similar enough and has like a kind of a similar system, and you have the same demon designs and all that. I think anybody who played Persona would find a lot of enjoyment, especially in SMT 5. Sleep848 asks, any idea of how long you would say the game would be? That depends on what kind of a player you are. If you're the one who goes for like the completionist route, I can easily see you spending over 100 hours in this game. But for like the average player, I'd say someone who does some of the side quests, not all of them the first time around, does most of the plot points, and a normal amount of grinding, I'd say you can have the game finished in about maybe 60 or so hours, maybe 60 to 70. But yeah, that just depends. It's just my estimate. But yeah, there is a ton to do in this game, which I'll talk more about that in the full review, of course. But yeah, I'd say it's a decently long game. Arid0914 says, would you say the game is accessible to newcomers of the series? So as I said earlier in the video, yes, this is a great place to start. You don't have to have any story experience at all. You'll be able to fully appreciate the story. Karmaki asks, is it fun? Yes, and this is important because Shin Megami Tensei games for the most part are gameplay oriented. That's like the big focus of the game. And yes, it's extremely fun. I'll talk about that once again in the review, the full review. But yeah, the game is extremely fun. It's probably one of the most fun games I've played this year. Alright, so that's all the time I have for answering questions today. Thank you all so much for asking. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully I answered the questions that you guys really wanted to know the answers to. But if you want to find out more on Shin Megami Tensei, make sure you subscribe to GameXplain and ring the bell for a lot more on Shin Megami Tensei V, including our full review and other things gaming too. Until next time.